Hey, good day to you. This is Stan Perchowski with Perchowski Estate Law, and this is the Ask Stan show every Thursday at 12 noon, where I answer all your estate planning questions submitted throughout the week. If you have a question about wills, trusts, Medicaid pre-planning, Medicaid crisis planning, the nursing home, or just estate planning in general, just send them to me here on Facebook or call me at 363-7222 or email me at perchowskiestatelaw@gmail.com. I'll answer them live on WKSR Radio, and we post them here on the Ask Stan show every Thursday. So, let's get right to it.
Four Tops on Classic KSR. Hey, wherever you go, take us with you at home, at work, or in your car all day. We've got 73 degrees right now. It's time for attorney Stan Perchowski from Perchowski Estate Law. Now, he's got good information for you today, and that's all good and fine. But the most important thing here is the Stan Perchowski oldie this morning, and that was Apollo 100 with Joe.
That's right. We can talk about estate and serious matters, but when it really boils down to what matters, it's the oldie of the week, right?
That's right. Stan, once again, my friend, good to have you this morning, and I know you got good information to share with us, and we'll turn it right over to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, Butch. Always a pleasure to be here Thursday mornings on the bonus hour. Hey, just real quick, I'm going to go over what I've got coming up. I got another webinar on August the 13th, which is a Thursday at 6 p.m. It's one of my wills, trust, in a nursing home. And then we're going to break out into an actual live event on August the 27th. I'm going to have them there at my office right there on the square. It's going to be live, but we're going to have live attendance with our social distancing and all the standard practices for the ongoing situation. I'm also going to stream it live, so if you're uncomfortable in actually coming to a live event and sitting, being 6 feet apart and that, you can still partake virtually. So that's August the 27th. I'm going to do that twice that day. I do it at noon and at 6 p.m. My mailers actually go out today. So if you don't get a mailer, don't feel left out. You're certainly still invited. Just call the office there at 363-7222 and we'll get you on the RSVP list. It is a little limited because our seating is spread out, and so that kind of takes up our space. But it's going to be called Wills, Trust, in the Nursing Home, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about. So, hey, listen, I like to talk about things that people ask me about. I do the Ask Stan show on Facebook Live as well as here on the radio, and I like to talk about topics that people bring up. And a couple weeks ago, if you remember, I talked about every now and then talk about a celebrity estate. I think we talked about Cher Bono or Sonny Bono a while back, remember?
Yes, we did. I remember that.
I talk about some of the well-known celebrity estates for a couple of reasons. One, they can be entertaining, of course. But the second one is, they're like us and they make mistakes. They screw things up. And the only difference between them messing up an estate or you or I is theirs get publicized a little more. Usually there's a little more money, and because they're, famous, they make the news and we hear about them. But it's very useful because when they make these mistakes, it's something we learn from. And the same sort of thing happens, sometimes on a little grander scale, but there's a lot of wisdom in analyzing what they did or didn't do and making sure that we don't make the same mistakes. So I want to talk about one that I found was just down that category because I've received calls, and I think maybe a little more so during the pandemic and the lockups and the stay at place orders, of folks that call and ask, hey, somebody, so-and-so did a handwritten will. They wrote it all down. And I want to talk about that because those can be very problematic. We have a name for that. It's called a holographic will. And a lot of folks will, as a side note, a lot of people say, hey, Daddy wrote down a will and he had it notarized. So that makes it all legal, right? And like I say, as a side note, notarization really doesn't make anything legal because the document's not notarized. The signature is notarized. And all it really means is the person that purportedly signed it had to identify that he was the person that actually signed the document. The notary does not review the document and approve it or say, or look it over for validity. They have nothing to do with the content. So notarization really is just for the signature, not the content. But anyway, a handwritten will, there was an artist, his name was Thomas Kincaid. Does that ring a bell? He was portrayed as the artist or the painter of light. He painted, if you've seen the pictures, you know who I'm talking about. He did a lot of pictures of cozy cottages, little country villages, and the way they called him the painter of light because he portrayed light as it came through breaks in the clouds and through leaves of the tree and shined on like at dusk or at dawn. And a lot of people know what I'm talking about. But anyway, he was an American artist, pretty famous, made a lot of money, and he passed away back in 2012. Well, he turns out he had a girlfriend. Okay, he was married. Nanette was his wife, and he had a girlfriend that he lived with for 18 months before he passed away. But it wasn't like a secret girlfriend thing. He was estranged from his wife for several years. They were actually separated. And it turns out that his estate got into probate because his girlfriend, her name was Amy Pinto Walsh, and Miss Walsh probated a couple of holographic wills that he had written. She produced 2 of them, and they were very illegible. I actually saw copies of them. It turns out Mr. Kincaid had somewhat of an alcohol or drinking problem. And when he passed away in 2012, his autopsy actually showed that he passed away from a toxic level of alcohol and alzaprin, or what was the one, the muscle relaxant? What was the muscle relaxant everybody would always
I
say?
knew you were going to do that. I don't know.
It escapes me right now, but it was a muscle relaxant, and the combination between that and alcohol was just deadly. And that's what he died of. And of course, these 2 holographic wills, or handwritten wills, that his girlfriend produced were very, very, almost illegible. I mean, you could get it, but I mean, I saw them. The handwriting was very, very sloppy. And of course, that threw into question the competence of them because of his problem with alcohol. So anyway, the battle ensues. They get into court. Of course, the wife, who, remember what I said earlier, he was separated. He wasn't divorced. So he had, his wife still enjoyed the status of surviving spouse. And they actually did a living trust plan several years before they separated. And they moved a lot of their property into the trust, which is probate avoidance. So anyway, a battle ensued because the court was going to have to determine the validity of these holographic wills because they purported to pass a lot of his property, it was about $10 or $12 million, to the girlfriend. And he had a beautiful home. And another thing that caught my eye was over in Santa Clara, California. I actually spent some time out there when I got out of college and took my first job in San Jose, California, working with General Electric. That was back in 1979. But so I was thinking of some old memories I had of Santa Clara County. But that's where this took place. And anyway, the battle began, and it got settled. So we don't know exactly how it happened because a lot of times when they settle a court case, they do what they call a gag order, where the parties are not allowed to talk about what the settlement was or who got what. But it went on for a couple of years, and it was fiercely fought because, as you can imagine, the wife and the girlfriend, they had no love for each other, and they're both pretty tenacious in trying to acquire Mr. Kincaid's property. So it got settled. Don't know what it was, but it got resolved. It was never published what it was. But the point is, when you have a game changer in your life, and like divorce is a big one. That was the other question I wanted to address. One was the handwritten wills, and the change in life, or like a divorce, don't seem to. One doesn't seem to have much to do with the other, but in a situation like this, it can. If you get divorced, that's sort of a big change in your life. And if you have any documentation in place, or if you don't have anything, that'd be the time to do it. And if you did have anything in place, a plan, that'd be the time to revisit it and make sure it still reflects what you want. Because one thing I've seen often is we'll have a will or a document that will say, I leave my wife all my property. Well, that's okay, and if you get divorced, she's no longer what they call the wife or the surviving spouse, and that invalidates that. But if you make the mistake of drafting the document by saying, I leave, Jane Doe, which is your wife, a certain amount, well, you've identified her by name, and after you pass away, if you don't, if your intent is not to leave it to her as your ex-wife, but you don't change the actual name, then you've got a problem because now she's identified specifically as an individual, and it will go to her whether she enjoys the status of surviving spouse or not. So anyway, that's how we learn from the rich and famous sometimes. So Mr. Kincaid, he did the right thing. He had a living trust drafted with his wife, but then when he got his girlfriend, he purportedly wrote a couple handwritten wills. And to me, it just looks like he probably knew better because he had done the right thing in the first place. But so I sort of that doesn't really pass the smell test, and I think that's probably how that was resolved, although that's not published. But these holographic wills, basically, I started off by saying just by writing it and notarizing doesn't make it valid. But just so you know, what you need to have a valid holographic will in the state of Tennessee is, of course, you got to be 18 years or older. It has to be written. The person has to be of sound mind. You can't be like Mr. Kincaid was purportedly could have been, heavily intoxicated and not of sound mind. And it has to be written by the testator himself. You can't dictate that somebody else write it. You can't say, hey, take this down for me and have them write it. And all the material provisions, things like the signature, the date, the asset distribution, all has to be in the handwriting of the testator himself to make it valid. So it just has to be signed. Doesn't have to be witnessed. Doesn't have to be notarized. So to me, that makes it very problematic. If it's not witnessed, the first challenge is, did they actually do it? Notarization could help with that. So anyway, I get a lot of calls like that. I think people, in lockup think, hey, I need to take care of this, so maybe I'll just pencil something down and get it on record. Not a good idea, in my professional opinion. Just leaves itself wide open for challenge. Just a recipe for a lot of fighting and arguing after we're gone. And I have seen, you don't have to be rich and famous and have a $12 million state for people to come out of the woodwork and fight over property. It doesn't take much. It's the same emotion that affects them as it affects us. And when you argue something like this, the legal bills will be astronomical, because if you want to get in and argue that these handwritten wills are valid or not, you want to talk about legal fees, it's going to be, it's going to be a lot. It's going to consume, the average estate. But anyway, the point being, when we have somebody that's rich and famous and they kind of mess up like this, we learn from that. So if you've got a plan, it needs to be updated every now and then, especially when something happens, like maybe a divorce or somebody you want to change or take out or add to. That's a good time to update it. And if you don't have any plan at all, hey, it's always a good idea to put something in place, because if you don't, the state of Tennessee will make one for you, and that may or may not be what you want. So that's what we do here at Pachowski State Law, and that's all we do. And we're down right there on the southeast corner of the square. Our number's 363-7222. You call us, we'll talk about it. I love to talk, and we'll tell me, got a call here just before. Somebody wanted,
yes, you did.
They're going to call me later. We're going to discuss something. We'll be glad to help iron something out for you. Just don't leave this stuff to chance. If you leave it to chance, it usually almost assuredly so, goes sideways and ends up not being what you wanted. And the whole idea of doing a plan is to get what you want, get your wishes down so that they can be carried out. So, hey, once again, what's coming up, webinar on the 13th, which is just 2 weeks out, I guess, from today. And the 6 o'clock, my wills, trust in the nursing home. And then again on the 27th, which is the end, also on a Thursday, at noon and at 6 p.m., I'm going back to the live workshops, the live seminars. You come and sit, we'll social distance, and we'll talk about the same thing. So if you want to learn more about this, I do all these free educational seminars. Come and learn about it, see if this is a fit for you. If it is, we got a plan for you. So, and oldie of the week, Apollo 100, Joy.
Yeah, we played that one right before you came on this morning.
It was great to hear it. A couple other good ones. Wipeout was one of the ones that probably everybody remembers.
I think you're making you a list, don't you?
I mentioned that one. I mentioned that one called Pipeline. I can't remember who did that, but that was a good guitar instrumental. Instrumentals were not real popular. They hardly ever made it #1, but every now and then there was a good one, and they were just...
Pipeline, now I might be wrong here. I'm guessing Chanties or something like that.
Sounds familiar. My son's a guitarist. Yeah. My son's a guitar player, and sometimes I'll hear him practice, and I'll hear that. Because it has that unique beginning of the bass guitar, and it's just a cool tune to listen to. So.
Yep.
I'll have another good one next Thursday.
All right, sounds good. Hey, Stan Pachowski, always a pleasure to have you with your segment from Pachowski Estate Law. You got that right.
That's right. Always a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Butch, and I'm always happy to sponsor the weather when it looks like this.
That's right. And he does that in the 5 o'clock newscast every day. Sponsors the weather. Give us your phone number down there again, Steve.
It's 363-7222. PachowskiEstatelaw.com. Can't miss me.
Sounds good. I'll see you next Thursday.
Okay, sounds good.
Have a great day, everybody. 16 minutes before 9 o'clock.